Hello, welcome to Board Game Madness. I'm Mike Ganade, and in today's matchup, which is our final matchup of our sort of Sweet 16 here, we have the number 6 seed, Quacks of Quedlinburg, versus the number 22 seed, Star Wars the Deck Building game. So if you want to hear more about what these games are, please go to our previous videos to get a quick overview of them. But, to cover things really quickly, we have sort of two deck building, bag building games that focus on different things. Quacks of Quedlinburg is a bag building game where you're going to take ingredients and then push your luck as you pull them out of a bag. And then Star Wars the Deck Building game is a head-to-head deck building game where you're building your deck and playing as the Empire or Rebellion. So that's a very quick overview. For more, please see our previous video. For the first round, we like to cover production. And for this round, I've sort of been focusing on my favorite components from each of the games. Let's start with Star Wars because it's pretty simple here. This game is primarily cards. It has a couple plastic cubes to count resources and a tracker for the Force. My single favorite component is obviously the cards. I really like the theme and the art in this game. Obviously the IP does a lot for me personally. And my single favorite type of card in the game are the planets that you're trying to conquer, because I think that wrinkle of the game is actually one of the best parts. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. My favorite component for Quacks of Quedlinburg is the ingredients that you're adding to your bag. The microfiber bag itself also feels very good to pick out your ingredients. But the ingredient chips that you put into your bag and then you're playing around and pulling out every round are my favorite part. So in both cases, sort of the tactile nature of the deck building or bag building is my favorite. As far as who wins production, from an art perspective, Star Wars is definitely my preferred art style. My least favorite thing about Quacks of Quedlinburg is this overall art style, and the theme's fine. It's just that the art style that goes with it seems really wacky and quirky and not something I can really get behind. The gameplay sort of makes up for it. Whereas the Star Wars art is fantastic. But I do think you get a little bit more in this box than Star Wars. Star Wars is just cards, some cubes, sort of your standard card game type fare. I should say that when the game first came out, you got sleeves for free, which was nice. I usually don't sleeve my games, but since they gave them to me for free and they were themed Star Wars, I went ahead and sleeved the game. Quacks of Quedlin gives you more. It has the chips, the bags, the microfiber bags, the big boards for your pots, which are very nice, and then the central scoring and the cards you flip over every round, along with some wooden pieces, rats, and other things to track everything. So you definitely get more in this box. I'm sure price point wise, it's a little pricier than Star Wars as well. So I guess keeping everything equal, this is pretty close because I do much prefer the art direction of this production over the art direction here. But I think if you were to put these out on the table and sort of people were walking by, this feels more fun. So I'm going to give Quacks the slight edge here and say its production's a little bit nicer, more impressive. I think if you were to walk by a table and see everyone digging stuff out of their bag and putting it in their pot, that's going to draw like walkers by at a convention more than seeing two people head to head playing this card game. It's going to look like every other Magic card game style head to head card game that people are playing at conventions. Whereas this would draw your interest in more. So I think that speaks to the production, and I'm going to give it the slight edge, even though from an art design perspective, definitely prefer Star Wars. So let's move on to game mechanics, because this is, these games both have bag building slash deck building in it. So there's a randomness to your drawing of your cards or your chips in this game. But, that's pretty much where the similarities end, because this is push your luck. You're controlling how many chips you're drawing. And this is, more of a battler where you're going head to head with players. Whereas this, you're less connected to the other players at the table. So let's talk about, in this round, what I've been trying to do at Game Mechanics is talk about some of the things I don't like or other people don't like. And the first thing I've sort of already talked about, which is, both of these games have a random draw element to them. In some cases, you can mitigate that draw, when you are going to draw your cards in a deck builder, but the luck of the draw is still a thing. If you get that right combination at the right time, it's going to give you a buff. And same thing with Quacks. Sometimes when you're pushing your luck and going for one more chip, you may get the perfect chip, which lets you win the round. And other times you can bust, and busting substantially hurts you. So for people that are super against any sort of luck in their games, both of these have those to an extent. And whether or not that luck ruins the game for you, I think is a factor. For me personally, I think games need an element of luck, or they just become, you're playing them the same way every time. Luck adds excitement, and while things can't be completely random, you need some sort of random element in there to create excitement. And I think both of these games do that well and give you relatively good agency about how to control that luck. But other people may be some more sensitive to that than I am. Other things I've heard, negative things I think people can say about Quacks of Quedlinburg is the game can sort of overstay its welcome for what it is. It is primarily a push your luck game, and it plays over a substantial number of rounds. It's like 7 or 8 rounds. And some people feel like that's one or too many rounds. I think also a fair critique is that what you're doing, everyone's sort of playing simultaneously, pulling chips out of their bag to go further in their pot, which keeps the game moving, but you do sort of feel disconnected from what the other players are doing at the table. In fact, you're barely competing with them at all. You're trying to get the furthest in your pot each round, but otherwise, there's plenty of each chip. You can buy whatever you want. No one's buying anything that you can't buy. You're playing your own game to a lot of extents. The only thing that's sort of changing that is the round competition, and then I think there's some cards that give priority to the person with the most this or the least that. So other than competing over those things, you're basically playing this game solo, against a sort of other players on the same score tracker. It does feel a lot more disconnected, whereas Star Wars is a head-to-head game where you are definitely engaged with the other player, directly competing with them. So if that type of competition and player interaction is important to you, Star Wars is definitely stronger than Quacks. That being said, Star Wars is only 2 players. It is strictly a head-to-head game. Quacks has more flexibility. And a lot of the major complaints and some of the things I talked about even on our previous video is that there are a lot of similarities between Star Wars the deck building game and another sci-fi deck building game called Star Realms. Some people call it a ripoff. Some people think this is better than it and builds off of it. So take that with what you will. If you're a huge Star Realms fan, you may love this or hate it for everything it borrows. I'm not sure how much innovation it has, but ironically enough, in our previous video, I put Star Wars the deck building game head-to-head against Star Realms. So you can see more comparisons between that game in that video. But I do think it's a fair criticism that Star Wars is borrowing a lot from Star Realms. Now, how much that irritates you or makes it a bad game is sort of up to you, but I think it's a fair criticism. I think the bigger problems with Star Wars when you play it a lot is that the Rebellion has certain strengths and weaknesses, and the Empire has certain strengths and weaknesses around the type of decks you can build, and that limits the combinations you can do. Actually, a lot of the comments I saw online that were negative about Star Wars the deck building game, which is something I very much agree with, is that it really just needs an expansion. There's just not enough cards and variety of strategies in the core box yet, and hopefully it'll get an expansion like other deck building games which have massive libraries of interesting cards like Ascension or Dominion or things like that. I think even Star Realms has more cards. So I think once this game gets some expansions and it can expand that, I think it'll improve on that problem, but it is a weakness. So I think when you sort of sum all these things up, I do think the fact that Star Wars relies so heavily on building off of Star Realms, I think the light, the force meter doesn't matter that much, isn't particularly interesting. If it's on your side, you get like a little bit more, but otherwise, I think it matters more for the rebellion than the empire. You know, otherwise it feels like an improved Star Realms to me. It really does, with a better IP. Whereas Quacks of Quedlinburg is a very interesting game, and when talking about expansions, this one has an immense number of expansions. So if this box were to sort of wane on you, or if you're looking for other mechanics, there's tons of options out there to expand this game. Whereas this game hasn't quite gotten that yet. But Quacks is my go-to push your luck game. I break it out. My kids play it. My wife plays it. Friends that come over can play it. It's a joy to teach. I'm not sure if you can see on the front, but it has plenty of awards both here and on the back from influencers that it's won. It definitely is almost an evergreen title when it comes to, you know, game mechanics and the spot it sort of holds in my collection. So for game mechanics, I have to go with Quacks. It's super original. I love pulling out stuff from the pot, and the final round when everyone's doing it at the same time is super entertaining. And I think it deserves a lot of the accolades and success it's had. So I'm gonna go with Quacks here as well. But don't you worry, because we're moving to theme next, and theme, I'm not even sure how much I should dwell on it. My least favorite thing about Quacks of Quedlinburg is this crazy art style on the front. I don't particularly like the art style at all. And then just the overall motif of this does not do anything for me. I think the overall theme of like being a crazy potion salesman and like pulling stuff out of your pot is fine. I just wish the quacks and the people and everything around it looked okay. I think the saving grace of this game is that the actual chips that you're putting in your bag and the potions you're using in your player board don't look like the cover of this box. Like if the whole game looked like the cover of this box, it would really sour the experience for me. But I can generally ignore this cover when I'm playing the game and focus on the chips and my pot. And then the only time I'm really seeing this type of artwork is on the scoring track, which is minor. So that's sort of its saving grace, but the overall theme of this game does absolutely nothing for me. If anything, it's a negative. Whereas Star Wars, huge Star Wars fan, I think this game, all the things it changes from Star Realms and evolves upon makes it better, and the theme makes it stronger. You know, being able to only buy the Rebellion cards as the Rebellion, only the Empire cards, and dovetailing each player into certain cards makes things super tense, and how you can remove other players' cards for preventing them from getting them is a really good tug-of-war type mechanic, whereas I can spend my resources to just remove Darth Vader and discard him from the line so you can't buy him. I don't have to risk him coming out. I can sort of sabotage him ahead of time, and vice versa. I think that's a really cool mechanic. But my favorite mechanic in this game, which I think is actually very, very strong, and I actually hope that future expansions expand on it even more, is I love this capturing of the planets, and I love that you can draw your planets and pick a planet and get an effect that's really important for you. I think it gives it a really good rubber banding effect, and a good tug of war, and makes the game even stronger. But overall, obviously the theme here and the artwork just substantially, I mean, miles and miles and miles ahead of Quacks of Quedlinburg, in my opinion. Just a much stronger theme. In the game, the interaction, everything about it is just more thematic, in my opinion, than Quacks. So let's move on to replayability here and see if Star Wars can pull out a pretty huge upset. So Star Wars has a decent deck of cards that, you know, in a 30-minute game, you're not going to see everything in the central market. There are several different ways to build your deck and different strategies you can try, but I do think that each side, the Empire and Rebellion, do have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I think if you try to fight too much against those strengths and weaknesses, I'm not sure how successful you'll be in a head-to-head game where someone's focusing on their strengths. So I think the lack of expansions in this particular game really hampers the overall replayability of the game. When you first get it, you're going to play it a ton. You're going to want to play both sides. I think the first time we played, I think we played at least 2 games back to back where the person I was playing against, it was like Rebellion Empire. Okay, let's switch. But, you know, after you do that a couple times and start leaning into your strategy for each side, I'm not sure how far you're going to go. Now, when it comes to replayability with Quacks of Quedlinburg, I think out of the box, it offers you a lot more. Every ingredient in the game, there's a bunch of different books that change what the ingredients in your bag actually do. There's at least 4 or 5 variations for each chip. And the game sort of instructs you to start with one particular set of books, but then on future playthroughs, you can completely mix and match those sets, and it drastically changes the ingredients and strategies that you want to focus on. I mean, ingredients sort of maintain a theme, but they can their effects drastically change, can change game to game, which can very much mix up and change your strategies playing this game and competing with other players. So I think from a replayability standpoint, I mean, I have had Quacks longer. It's, you know, this game came out in 2018, whereas this game is relatively new, 2023, I believe. Yeah, I mean, this definitely came out last year, or it's definitely newer. So, you know, the fact that this game is older, but I still think there's more replayability in this box, whereas Star Wars, as much as I like it, I really, really want an expansion for this. Whereas I'm getting close to, I want an expansion for Quacks, but I don't feel like I need it. I still haven't bought any of them. I've heard there's several that are quite good. And as much as I like the game, I should definitely look into it. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I like the core game so much. Whereas Star Wars, like, I'm desperately waiting for a new core box, a new expansion, different characters that are missing. You know, the theme is so heavy in it, and there's so many cool things to do, but I want more card mechanics and paths of building my deck. Whereas Quacks of Quedlinburg, again, I'd love expansions because I love the core game, but I haven't felt the need for it. So I think that speaks to its replayability. So I think we have a clear winner here. I'm not going to push through an upstart new game over top of a much higher seed, but we're going to have Quacks of Quedlinburg win in this particular round and take out Star Wars the deck building game. I do think, though, I should say that Star Wars is a great deck building game, certainly worth the money. I think there's great value in the box. I just think it needs more, especially in deck building games where so many of the good deck building games out there have so many expansions and new card mechanics to play around with. Star Wars feels like just the start, like it's giving you like a little taste. And it's an enticing taste, but it's not enough. Whereas Quacks of Quedlinburg, the core box experience is very unique, and it's not competing with all the other deck builders sort of out there. It's its own unique bag building, push your luck mechanics going on that are very rewarding. Again, as long as you don't absolutely hate, you know, the luck of the draw in this case. So we're going to put Quacks through. It's the clear winner. It's going to move on to round 3, to our Elite 8 round. And with that, it comes to the point in the video here where I ask you to subscribe so you don't miss those next videos and see how much further Quacks can go in this tournament. So please like and subscribe the video. But other than that, we will see you next time on Board Game Madness.